You're listening to the Heart Lessons Podcast with me, Sarah Rieke. Real women, real stories, real faith. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm so glad to have you joining me here today. And today you are listening to episode number 56. Well, welcome back. After a couple weeks off for the summer, I'm back. And so I just wanted to say hello again. Happy first day of school to those of you who are starting school today, our family being one of them. Today my son starts second grade, and tomorrow my daughter will start her second year of preschool, and my littlest one will still be home with me. But we are in the back to school season, that is for sure. Well, I wanted to share something new with you, something that I'm going to start here on the podcast and on all of my social media places. Every month, I am going to have a monthly heart focus. And I think having that focus is going to help me provide more directed and purposeful content for you and allow you to know what to expect as you follow along each month. So every month on the podcast, on my Instagram, on my Facebook, it's all going to be centered on the same theme, the same topic, the same heart focus. And as I said, it's just going to help me stay more directed with the content that I want to provide for you and help you know what you're going to be able to find when you visit me here or on social media. And this is also going to include some new logos and some new graphics just to kind of keep it all cohesive. And honestly, it's just going to help me just keep my mind focused on and directed towards a similar goal, similar content to provide for you. So I'm just really excited about this heart focus. And for the very first heart focus for this month of September 2018, the topic is going to be living with and loving others well. And I just think that goes so well with the new school year. There are a lot of new relationship dynamics that come along with the new school year, be it, parent to teacher, a parent to another parent, new friends, new schools, new classrooms, new roommates, lots of new relationship dynamics. And so I thought to kick off this living with and loving others well heart focus, it would be great to just talk about personality. And so today we're going to hear from Beth McCord, and she is an expert in the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a personality typing system. And so Beth and I today are going to talk about what it is, how we can use it, and how it can help us move towards health within ourselves, toward others, and in our relationship with Christ. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Enneagram, but it is a really great personality typing system. And the thing I love about it most is that it helps you take the difficult parts of your personality and move towards health with what the gospel provides for you, the redemption elements the gospel provides for your specific personality type. So it's just really fun to me, honestly. I really enjoy talking about the Enneagram, and you can ask my husband. He's kind of sick of me talking about it, but I enjoy it. So I'm so excited to have you join in on this conversation about the Enneagram. And my hope and prayer is that it will help you live with and love those around you a little bit better. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Beth McCord. Well, Beth McCord, welcome to the Heart Lessons Podcast. I'm so happy to be chatting with you this afternoon.
Yeah, thanks. It's so great to be here.
And we are in the middle of a series about living with and loving others well. And I just thought, what a great tool we have right now, the Enneagram. And I'm just so excited to be able to talk with you about how that relates to the people that we know and love and the people that we're getting to know. And so just thank you for your voice in this. I'm excited to introduce everyone to the Enneagram, or probably many people are already in love with it. And so we're just adding to that conversation. So right. I'm very excited. So will you just give us a little snapshot of yourself, who you are, what you do, your family, all those great things?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so obviously I'm Beth McCord. My family, we live in just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, in Franklin. It's a beautiful place over here, and love just being here. We've lived here for about 4 years. So originally I'm from the Midwest, Kansas City, and have literally traveled to, Normal, Illinois was the last place we lived, and it was very normal. And St. Louis. And so we kind of made this loop-de-loop 2 times with all of those places and then landed here. So,
Okay.
So it's been kind of a interesting life as a pastor's wife, with all the moves and the churches. And so we landed down here, and my husband, we've been married for 23 years. He's an executive pastor at a church in Nolensville, which is about 30 minutes from where we're living. And we have a daughter who is 18, going to be a freshman in college, and then a son who'll be a sophomore in college, Nate. Libby is a type 2, Nate's a type 6, which is interesting because he looks very much like his dad, as in personality and looks.
Oh, funny.
So his dad is a 6 as well. And so now that Nate is about the age that we started dating, it's like, oh my goodness, you're a lot like your father was.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. But it's also sweet because they get each other, and he asks his dad for a lot of advice, and so it's a sweet friendship, but it is amazing. It's like, and, a lot of times, kids can be like their parents, but then when you understand the personality structure, you're like, oh my goodness, you really are
That's
a lot
crazy.
like your dad. Mm-hmm.
And like, it's probably helpful to have your husband as a reference to be like, how can I relate to him, or how can I talk to him?
Yeah.
That I'm sure that's great. I have that feeling about my youngest. He's currently 1, but I'm like, I feel like your dad was just like you when you were when he was that age. Yeah. So I'm wondering if that's going to be our story too.
Right. Yeah.
That's so funny.
And we'll get into this later. We didn't really know his type till he was, in his teenage years. But,
okay.
But as he's grown older and that personality has blossomed and we're seeing it more, it is really neat to understand his type on a deeper level so that we can really relate to him and guide him the way he should go versus the way we think he should go. And so it's been a real blessing for sure.
Yeah. I think that's something that I just want to do as a parent. I have 3 kids and they're pretty young, but just realizing that each one is very individual and they're all going to have individual needs from my husband and I, like throughout the years. And so just recognizing that, I think, is just going to be really helpful to raise them well and to be the people that God wants them to be. So
right.
I just appreciate your example and your resources for
thanks.
that. So, well, I know we mentioned types and Enneagram a little bit. So let's just start with the foundation. What is the Enneagram? Why should we use it? How can we use it?
Yeah, so the Enneagram, the word sounds really weird. It is simply a Greek word that means, Ennea means 9, and gram means a diagram or a drawing of some sort. So basically, we're talking about this 9-pointed geometric figure that if you see the symbol, you'll see that it looks like a 9-pointed star, basically, with a circle around it. And so some people are a little like, what is this symbol? This is kind of weird. But it's just representing 9 basic types and also the fluidity that our types have. So we're not just this stagnant type and we must look this one way. The neat thing about the Enneagram is if you think of it like your internal GPS, it's going to show you where your current location is, but also the paths you take in growth and health, but also where you can veer off course and land in those common pitfalls that we do time and time again. But the goal of the Enneagram is, a lot of times what happens when people come to the Enneagram, it can be really hard because it exposes everything. So not only the good, but all the way down to the darkest crevices. And so what can happen is a lot of people can see that and they kind of really resonate with the not so great parts, and it kind of can sink them down like, is this all I am? And because it's so hard for us to see the good and the beauty of our type. So the Enneagram, why it's different from some of the other types out there, is that it's showing you why you do what you do. What are the motivations behind your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors? A lot of personality typologies out there say what you do or what you're good at, strengths and preferences, which are great. But the Enneagram is actually going much, much deeper. It's saying why you do what you do. And so that's why it gets a little creepy inside, where it's like, why is this reading my internal diary? And so you feel really exposed, and it can be hard because you're not only are you seeing, the problem spots and the weaknesses you have more clearly, but everyone else is too. And so what I do is I let people see that, yes, we have these weaknesses and struggles and sin patterns, but Christ is the one that is always bringing us back to what he has done for us, how he has set us free, but also how he created our personalities, that when we are in health, basically when we're resting in our identity in Christ, we will exhibit naturally the overflow of the good that he has put in us and how he's created us. And so a lot of people have a hard time seeing that, but that's really where the freedom and the blessings for ourselves and others lie, is by fully embracing how God created us and that Christ set us free to live that out.
And so what would an example be of like how a type can rest in Christ? I feel like something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is like resting in Christ is taking a lot more effort than the word rest sounds like.
Exactly.
So,
it is.
It's more of like an active rest, which is not what we think of as rest. But how does that work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So each of the types will have different thought patterns and, motivational patterns and fears and desires that the personality is constantly playing in their mind. So it's almost like this record player, and we have correct messages and incorrect messages. And the incorrect messages are constantly telling us, no, you have to be like this, or you have to think this, or you can't do that, or whatever. And so it feels so real because we've lived with it our whole life. But then when we come to this realization of how the gospel has set us free, we start to realize, I don't have to think that way. So an example, let's say we'll take, my type 9. My type is like, your presence doesn't really matter. Your voice doesn't really matter. No one's going to listen to you. And even if they do, why should you assert your voice? Why is it more important than others? You should just be quiet and not say anything and just go along to get along so there's peace and harmony. Well, that's not how God originally intended me to be as a type 9. As a type 9, he created me to bring peace and harmony and wholeness and oneness and a serenity and all these other beautiful qualities. But my whole personality inside, when I'm listening to the wrong side of the record player, it's saying, no, that's not right. You need to be in this one place of not saying much or not knowing yourself or just allowing others to be in the spotlight, not you. And so what happens is, so for me to overcome those messages, like you said, it's not like this peaceful, I'm going to sit back and kick back the chair and relax.
Right.
It's, I have to literally step forward into a space that is unknown, unfamiliar, and feels absolutely the opposite in some instances of who I am or who I thought I was. So if you think about like the Truman Show, for those that have watched it.
Yeah. Jim Carrey.
Yes, exactly. So Truman was in this dome and living this life that he thought was real, but it wasn't. It was all false and fake. I mean, there were some obviously real aspects to it, but all the people were actresses and actors. His mom, quote unquote, his mom, his dad, his wife, all of them were actors or actresses putting on a show, but he was the only one that was real. Well, think of that as like our personality. Our personality has both high parts that are real and authentic and true of who we really are, but the lower parts aren't the real us. It's this persona, but it feels so real. So at the end of the movie, sorry for those that haven't seen it.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. But at the end of the movie, you see him trying to escape these patterns, right? And to escape this false reality that he's realizing something's not right. And he struggles to escape. It's so hard. And then he gets to this door finally, and he opens it, and it's just blackness. And he's standing there with this blackness, and he has no idea what's on the other side. And then you hear this booming voice of the creator of the show, and it's like it's the last final draw of the personality to say, you can't go out there. You need us. You're safer here. Believe this false world. And, he's like, but this, he's like, this isn't real. And so he decides to step into the unknown, trusting that the reality, the truth, is going to set him free. Now, of course, they don't really show what happens next in its fullness, but that's what I think of when I'm resting in Christ. I know that God is calling me to see who I am in light of Scripture and what He has said and demonstrated. So as a 9, what He has demonstrated to me is, no, my presence does matter. 1, He created me. 2, He sent Christ from heaven onto earth to love and pursue me and to live a perfect life, die on the cross, rise from the dead, so that I can have my sins not only forgiven, but his righteousness put on me. Therefore, I am completely 100% his and free. And that, I mean, talk about your presence mattering. That, wow, like I matter.
Yeah.
And so even though it doesn't always feel true, I have to step into that darkness and trust the reality and the truth of the gospel, that it's real, and to get out there and to do this work that I'm doing. And not because much of myself, but trusting him in the work. And so that's where the freedom of quote unquote resting in Christ, my rest is what he says is true. Therefore, I'm not going to believe these false realities, even though they're so strong sometimes and they feel so real, that I'm not going to walk in that anymore. Or at least I'm going to, ask the Holy Spirit to take those false messages away and walk in light of what his truth says. So that's kind of what resting in the gospel and the truth means for me. But like you said, it's really more of a daily battle than a rest. At the same time, when we do it, we do have a restful heart. Like I am where I always should have been, and he has brought me there. So it's kind of it's like you're saying a word, but it actually means something different. So that was a great question.
It's almost like in order to get to the rest, you have to do a lot of work.
Yes, exactly. And the rest that you think that you're wanting actually looks very different, but it feels so good. So for instance, as a 9, we all love peace and rest and harmony. So like, let's go sit on the beach or at the lake or on the hammock. Like that's when I'm going to be at rest. But actually the rest that I'm really seeking is when I show up and offer myself through the gifts that God has given me. So I'm actually doing, but there's this peace and this light and this radiance that kind of overwhelms me because I'm giving of myself in the way that God has designed me. So there's just this different peace. It's not what I thought I wanted. Yeah. And so it's really beautiful to see, wow, that is a whole different level of experience than my personality thought it wanted. And now I get to experience what he really designed me to have.
That's so good. So how do we determine what type we are so that we can pursue the correct rest in Christ that our soul is actually searching for?
Yeah, no, that's so great. Yeah, the Enneagram is a very complex system. And if you get into some of the books out there, they're so great, but they're pretty daunting. And it's kind of like chewing on a big steak when you're not quite ready to eat a big steak. And so what I've tried to do with my materials and online courses is to make things very easy, like Cliff Notes version. Like, I know this is complex, but it doesn't need to be that complex when you're first learning it. So when you want to find your type, first and foremost, remember that this is why you do what you do. So don't think of the outward behaviors, because some people will say, well, I like a perfectly clean home, so I must be a perfectionist. Well, every type can want a perfect home, but they'll just want it for different reasons. So we're always getting to, well, why do you do that? Not what you do, but why. And so the underlying motivations, what we really want to focus in on to begin with. Now, there's a lot of other things that you can be looking at in the Enneagram, but the things that I found really helpful for people is to always come back to, what is your core fear? So what is the things that you have to run away from? Your personality is like, oh my goodness, this cannot happen. Other core fears from the other types might be uncomfortable and you really don't enjoy, but there's this one that's like, oh no, it cannot happen. Yeah. But then we also have what's core desires, where, oh, if I just could obtain this, then I would be totally fine or satisfied or complete, whatever word you want to use. So there's core fear and core desire, but then there's also what's called the core weakness, or other teachers will say the passion or the deadly sin. But I like to use the core weakness because it reminds me of Paul talking about the thorn in our side. That, you keep saying, please take this away from me. And the Lord doesn't, but it's to represent that though we are weak, he is strong and his grace is sufficient.
I love that. Yeah.
And so we're going to be having this battle with this core weakness our entire life. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't use it. And we grow, of course we grow, but it's always going to be there kind of just pulling at us. And so when I say the core fear and core desire and core weakness, those things should really resonate from one type specifically. Now, like I said, just realize we use all 9 types, And some more than others, and there's reasons, like, we're not going to be able to get into it here, but in my course, I'll explain what wings are, what the triads are, what these lines mean, and all of that matters and why people can go, but I also see myself as this number or that number. And so there's a lot of layers to it. But to find your main type, if you can land on your core fear and core desire and core weakness, that is a huge start. Now, another thing that I show people is the message their heart longs to hear. And that's where the gospel answers that. Mm-hmm. And so that's a really key piece as well. So as we kind of go through kind of the descriptions of the types, just really be listening to the why you do what you do, not just that you do certain behaviors. So we'll hone in on core fears, desires, weakness. And if we have time, we'll get to the message our heart longs to hear, which is where they'll really feel this, oh yeah, that's when the gospel really sets me free, when I take captive of that. Yeah. So that's the great place for us to start.
Yeah. And then I know the temptation always with the Enneagram or any personality type, as soon as you hear, is to figure out what your husband is and what your kids are and what your mother-in-law is or whatever. So I know that with the Enneagram, you're not supposed to type other people. So can you tell me why that is? And then how can it still be a helpful tool if we aren't allowed to do that?
Right. Okay. So that is, it feels like a conundrum inside because we so want to know why other people do what they do. Plus, the Enneagram is such a great tool to have better understanding and compassion and empathy for others, because we do want more mercy and grace and forgiveness in our lives with each other. And so the Enneagram, when we do know one another's types, it does allow us to have a deeper, richer compassion and understanding. So a lot of people do want to know their friends and spouses and coworkers and children, etc. But that may not, be possible. So and here's the thing. A lot of people say, oh, do you just walk around all day, guessing people's types? And what I will say is, at the beginning, I kind of was like everybody does. But the deeper I've gotten into the Enneagram and the more I understand the Enneagram, the more I realize I really don't know what people's types are.
That's interesting.
Until I type them. So just as someone who's been doing this for 15 years, I know a lot of people might have read about all the types and they're starting to feel like they get to know them. But there's so many layers. I mean, it's not just 9 types. There's so many subtypes that it's almost, look around the world. I mean, we're so different, right?
Yeah.
But yes, there's 9 basic types. But even in those basic types, they can look so different. I would just be very careful in naming someone or telling someone that they're type 1. It's their own journey that they need to find their type. That's a really important factor. But 2, you could be so absolutely wrong. For instance, a type 3, and this is one of the subtypes, there's 3 subtypes to each of them. One of the subtypes of type 3 looks a lot like a 1. Mm-hmm. And so you might be saying, oh, you're definitely a 1 when they're not. Or someone could say, oh, well, I love to achieve, I must be a 3, when actually they might be an 8. And so the lack of knowing the depth of the Enneagram can cause a lot of mistyping of people. And so that's why we really just say, you know what, just let them take the time to navigate their own journey and encourage them that you can. Now, at the same time, people are going to still try to guess in their mind. But what I would say is if you can't help but just kind of guess, hold a couple numbers loosely.
Okay.
Instead of just oh, they must be this number. Just go, you know what? I don't think they're these 4 or 5 numbers, but I bet they might land in some of these 3 numbers. And then see how that takes you with that person. But again, try to let them be the one to name you, because you might be very surprised.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Something that I heard, I think I heard it from Suzanne Stabile, a podcast that she did. I'm sure you're familiar with her, Beth. She said basically the Enneagram is you think about it, that everyone is wearing a different color pair of glasses.
Yep.
And everyone sees the world completely differently. Each of the 9 types sees the world completely differently. And so even if you don't know that person's specific type, you just understand, they could be seeing the world or approaching this situation in a completely different way than I would. And so it just, like you said, it can allow greater compassion, greater empathy, greater understanding, just almost well, you don't know until you're in their shoes, and you're never really going to be in their shoes,
Right.
Experiencing the world the way they do. So I just think it just opens up just this greater compassion and
Yes.
greater love for just personality diversity and how people relate to the world.
Absolutely. And that's if when people see like my symbol with the Enneagram, the logo that I use, there's 9 different colors. And that's kind of the idea.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. So it's obviously, they're just made up colors with the numbers. It's just kind of, it flows. But I use that throughout all my material. So if I'm talking about a type 9, it's always going to be purple. If I'm talking about a type 4, it's going to be kind of a lighter green color. So like on my Instagram account, you can scroll through. We go through a series every 2 weeks. So every weekday we have a type on that series. So type 1, this is the information on your type on this particular topic. And so when you scroll through, you'll always see that color so that people can, that's the lens they see through.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. And that is so helpful. Like you said, even if you can't guess the person's type, just assume you probably don't see it the same way.
Yeah,
That's probably the better stance to come to every situation is I probably am not seeing it from their viewpoint. I'm misrepresenting them because I think they're going to see it like me. And now I'm upset because they're not doing it the way I would do it.
Yes.
And so we call that a suicide. And
that's good.
Because, you're killing relationships based off assumptions that you really aren't clear on. Like they might feel clear, they might feel accurate, but are they? And so we need to take a step back from those assumptions that we're like, they're real, and go, you know what? They might not be. They might, but they might not be. And what if they're not? Should I ask clarifying questions to help this relationship go forward versus attacking, being hurt, being, whatever it is that will destroy the relationship? Why not ask clarifying questions? Hey, you said this, and you know what? I know for me that if I were to see it that way, it would mean this. Is that what you were meaning? If not, can you help me understand why you said it or what your perspective was? And so not to be accusatory, but inquisitive is a very helpful tool.
Yeah, that's so good. All right, well, let's do it, Beth. Let's get into the 9 types.
All right, great. All right, so as we talked, there are 9 types. And I think some of the things that you were kind of hoping us to touch on, just so I can let people know, is, well, again, we'll kind of mention these core fears and desires and weakness. And then we're going to just briefly talk about when you come into any given situation, what is your primary focus of attention? Like when you walk into a room, like what are you like focusing in on just naturally with your personality type or with your relationship or any circumstance? And then we'll try to bring in how the gospel frees that type in. Obviously, the gospel frees us all the same, but there's this piece of us that's like, yeah, the gospel's so great and true, but is it really true? So there's this thing that's kind of missing in us, and the gospel answers this for each of the types. So it's really a beautiful thing. So we'll go kind of quickly. I mean, meaning, obviously we want to get this all in. So we can kind of stop a little bit for chit chat. But I know that people would love to hear more on, especially when we land on their type or their spouse's type. But for time purposes, on the podcast, we'll just kind of go through these few elements. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay. So we'll start with type 1. So type 1 is the moral perfectionist. And each Enneagram teacher is going to have maybe a different name. I use the names from my teacher, Catherine Faber. I love her 2-word description. I think it encompasses the type very well. So the type 1, the moral perfectionist. And they fear being wrong, bad, evil, inappropriate, corruptible, unredeemable. And so think of the ones as the people who ethically and morally, they don't want to go off course. They want to stay the straight and narrow. It's very important. So their core desire is to have integrity, to be right, to be virtuous, to be the good boy, the good girl. So really kind of the real internal perfectionist. Now, some ones want to perfect themselves, some want others to follow their perfect example, and some ones want to reform or perfect the world, okay? Now, the core weakness of the one is resentment. And this is anger that they don't like nines, or I mean, not nines, type ones don't really want to admit they have anger because that'd be bad and wrong. So they kind of repress it down. And what comes out is this resentment. And it's where they're kind of continually frustrated and dissatisfied with either the world or others for not coming through with what needs to happen. And the reason this happens is if they, let's say, walk into a room and it's a mess, or even if it's clean, but there's something just slightly off, it leaps out at them and it assaults them. It's not just they're looking around for all the wrong things. It's not that at all. It's literally, it leaps out and assaults them. And they think that happens to everyone else. And so why isn't everyone else picking up the trash or hanging the picture just right? Or why don't people see these things? And so it creates a resentment that they have to be the ones to do all of the work or fixing or making things perfect. Now, when they walk into a room, their focus of attention is seeing error because they want to reform and improve. Now, for others, it's like, man, that's kind of like, why are you just seeing errors? Well, again, it's not that they're necessarily trying. It's that the imperfections leap out at them. And here's a great story. I was out to dinner it was like a week ago with some good friends. And the friend and I were walking to the restroom together, and on the wall was this beautiful, really big board with corks, like wine corks, all like in these really nice patterns. And I was just taking the whole thing in and just as a whole. Well, she's like, oh, that's so beautiful. And then instantly she said, oh, there's a little missing piece. And it literally was down in the right-hand corner. And this thing was like probably 7 by 4 feet. I mean, it was pretty substantial. And she saw this one tiny missing piece, and it was kind of dark in that space. And I just laughed because we were talking Enneagram the whole night anyway. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. Like it leapt out at you, didn't it? And she's like, oh yeah. Like she didn't realize how, she thought it was funny after I pointed it out. But we were just talking about how that is how it is for the one. It's not that she's looking at that thing going, let me see if I can find the imperfections. It just leapt out at her, and she saw it so much faster than I did. And so that's how it is for the one when they're in a situation. And so think of them as the people that really want to bring back wholeness and rightness and goodness again to the world.
I was just going to say that's where I think I fall there in the one category.
So am I speaking your language?
Yes.
Okay. And it's hard, isn't it? I mean, and what I've heard is that ones feel misunderstood. Like, why does everyone think that I'm trying to judge or correct or put people down? Like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm wanting to bring like the goodness and the wholeness of the garden back to its original state. That's just where my heart leans. Mm-hmm. So when you walk into a situation or a room, so seeing errors to reform and improve or to make it perfect and good is really out of a good part of your heart, especially when you're really healthy, right? Like, I just want to make things right. I want everyone to experience the rightness of the world and how things, should be. So the message that the one longs to hear is that they are good. And obviously we're on this side of heaven, and so we're all very aware that we're not perfect. But the message of the gospel, what it says to the type one is that though they may not be good, that Christ is. Mm-hmm. And Christ has given them his perfect righteousness so that they can be forgiven completely and made right and whole because his perfectness was put on them or imputed on them. And so that is so important for the one to recognize, oh, wait, the very thing I wanted, the very thing I thought I didn't have that I have to strive for, I have in Christ. And it allows them to rest in the imperfections they have because they're perfect in Christ, because of Christ. And so that's the one. So that's kind of how it shapes out for the one. So then the type twos, there are supportive advisors. And the type twos, they really fear being worthless and needy, dispensable, like inconsequential, and they definitely fear not being loved, wanted, or rejected. They fear rejection. And they desire to be loved and wanted and appreciated. So the twos are going to do a lot of helpful things and serving and focusing on others. And they have this intuition of, they'll walk into a room and they feel other people's feelings and they know what their needs are. And so if they walk into a big room, they kind of hone in on the one with the greatest need or the greatest suffering. And again, it's like the one, it's not like they're sitting there coming in the room going, let me see. How am I going, am I just going to...
You look so miserable. Let me talk to you.
It's just this natural inclination of their personality. And so their focus of attention is other people's approval. And so to get approval for them or to get their appreciation and gratitude, they feel like they must serve or help or advise in some form or fashion. And so what better than to find the person who needs it? And so it's this natural gravitation to those that are in need. And so they want to offer themselves in hopes that they'll get what they're longing for, which is being wanted for and loved. So what happens, though, is their pride, which is their core weakness, can get in the way. And the pride comes into kind of like almost two forms. One, they really do know what people need. Like they have this amazing ability to just know. And they know they know. And so the other thing that they do with that pride is kind of insert themselves into people's lives, even when it's not asked for, especially when they're not doing well. So the more they feel that they're not loved and wanted, the more they're going to insert their helpfulness into other people's lives. So they're going to sometimes cross boundaries because they're really hoping that someone will feel like, oh, thank you so much. This was so great. Mm-hmm. You're so kind, because they think that's what love is. But that's not real love. Real love, what they want is to be wanted for just being them. So this unconditional love, what God has, agape love. And really that's what Christ gives them, right? So Christ answers their heart's longing by saying, I actually pursued you while you were a sinner, Romans 5:8. So I wanted you and I loved you, not because you did anything, but because of just who you are. And that will really free up the type 2. So type 3s are the successful achievers. And these types fear failing, being incompetent, inefficient, exposed. They definitely fear being worthless and not appearing successful. So what they really are desiring and kind of striving for is to be valuable, admired, respected, to have high regard. Basically, this wonderful, successful image is what they desire. But the core weakness that they have is deceit. Now, the thing that deceit really means for them is that they're deceiving themselves into believing that they're only the image they're presenting to others. And how I like to let others know this is, if for those that know football, my husband was a place kicker, and there's a line that says, you're as good as your last kick. So if you made it, everyone loves you. If you missed it, everyone hates you.
Right.
Basically. And so that's how a 3 kind of operates in life is if I was successful or seen successful, then I'm good and I'm okay and loved and wanted and admired. But if I failed in any way, shape, or form, so it's not even just total failure, it's like second place is failure. Then I am not loved, I am not, valuable, I'm worthless, etc. And so their deceit is they think they're only this successful image, or they have to be this successful image. When in fact, what they really long for is they want to be loved and valued for just being themselves without having to achieve a certain status or certain image. Well, that's exactly what Christ does. So Christ didn't come because they were the most successful or achieved or did the right thing so that Christ would say, you know what, I think I do want you. He came because we were failures. We failed. We weren't perfect. And he came to rescue us and so that we could be with him. And so when the 3s can rest in who they are in all their glory, right? The beautiful side that God created them, but also their depravity, that Christ has all of it and loves all of it and has rescued them from everything. They can just rest and be, and also be accomplishers, but be versus just the doer. Their focus of attention will be like tasks to accomplish, and goals, and like they're setting all of these things up so that they will hopefully get praise and recognition so that they can feel loved. But as we just talked about, that can be a slippery slope because really that will never happen to the capacity that they long for. There might be a quick, oh, you're great, or that was wonderful, good job, but it is fleeting. Whereas Christ, what he gives is the same message, but from I accomplished everything for you. I was successful on your behalf. Therefore, I love you. I see you. I desire you. You're worth me and like dying for you.
Yeah.
And so really what they're longing for comes from Christ's message than those fleeting comments. So type 4 are romantic individualists. They fear being inadequate, emotionally cut off, plain, mundane. They also feel that they're defective and flawed, and they really fear kind of being defective and flawed. And they definitely fear being without a unique significance. So what they're striving for is to be unique, special, and definitely their just most authentic, true self. So they're constantly searching for this authentic self. And looking for it, and they know who they are. They know their emotions. They have a lot of emotions, and they're very well versed in what they're feeling. But because of this fear of being defective and flawed, and actually feeling they are. So think of a puzzle that we all are a puzzle, and there's this one missing piece that the type 4 feels they have. And so the puzzle could have been so beautiful if it was whole and complete, but it's not. Therefore, I'm not as beautiful or radiant or special as I could be. So will people love me? Well, I better show a unique side of me so that people can see why they should love me. So they feel like they have to show this unique side of them, what's special and different because of the defectiveness. But what happens is their core weakness is envy. And so they feel this piece that's fundamentally flawed in them. And yet they look around at everyone else, in their puzzles and but they're all whole and they're beautiful. And, oh, I long to have what they have. Of course, everyone else is sitting there going, no, you don't understand.
Right.
I'm defective and flawed too. But this feels so real to the 4 that they're the only ones that are defective. And it's just a deep agony and pain that I wish I just felt whole and that there wasn't this defectiveness in me. And so what they really long for is they long to be seen and known for exactly who they are and loved in that unique space. That they don't have to become more unique, that God sees you. He created you in your mother's womb. He knows you more intimately than anyone else, and he created you beautifully, just the way he wanted you. You weren't defective or flawed. I mean, obviously we're sinners, but we're all sinners.
Right.
And we all need Jesus. And so they're the 4, we don't want to say, oh, you're just like everyone else, because you're not. You're special and unique. But God sees how you're special and unique, and he loves you just for that. And so the heart can rest in, though others may not see all of my uniqueness, God does. And he loves it. And so that can put their hearts at rest. Now, their focus of attention when they're walking into a room is usually what's missing and longing, and to allow their emotions to go into this space of longing for what's missing. And so you can kind of think of the garden like we're missing the garden, really. I mean, the beauty and the wholeness and the richness and the depth of emotions there that are glorious. They're longing to come back to that space. And it's almost like they felt like they've been there, and so they're looking to go back there. So when they come into a room, they love to experience the depth of emotions and beauty and aesthetics and creativity in hopes that they can maybe get back to that space. Then our type 5s are the investigative thinkers. And the 5s are fearing annihilation, being ignorant or incapable, not having enough knowledge, being invaded by others, or obligated in some way that is being placed upon them without them really wanting. And so the 5s desire to be knowledgeable, capable, and competent, but they feel and fear that they don't have enough knowledge. And especially in this age of internet and all the depths of just searching, when will we ever stop knowing? So they really feel, I don't have enough knowledge. If I have enough knowledge, then I can use it and move forward with confidence. But there's so much more to know. And so that can keep them kind of paralyzed in this state of wanting to learn more before I move forward. And the core weakness of the 5 is avarice. And so avarice, it tends to talk about like being greedy with money, but that's not what this is. This is where they feel that they lack inner resources, like energy levels and capacity to be with people. So if they have too much interaction with others, they fear that they're going to experience catastrophic depletion. So this actually makes them want to hold on to their inner resources and minimize their needs. So think about all of us being cell phones, and your extroverts out there are like a cell phone with a Mophie case. They just go hang out with more people, and they hit the button and they're charged up again. And then your introverts, obviously there's a wide range of introverts and extroverts, but your introverts are those that by the end of the day, they don't have a Mophie case, and, at least maybe halfway through the day or 3/4 of the day, they're like, you know what, I got to go plug in. This is just too much. Well, the 5 is someone who they wake up in the morning, they have about 20-25% battery every day. Like, that's it. And they know I only have so much I can offer interaction with people. So they need to ration and manage that correctly, or they're going to feel the catastrophic depletion and annihilation. Now, to some, they're like, well, that seems pretty extreme. But if you talk to a 5, that's absolutely what it feels like. And so let's say they're going through their day. And they're like, okay, I'm going to have a meeting here and a meeting there. So they're kind of portioning out their energy reserves because they don't know when they're going to be able to plug back in until maybe that evening.
That makes sense.
So let's say at the end of the day, they're at 5%, and so okay, I got 5% to go home and eat dinner with my family and unwind. Well, then they get home and the wife is like, or the husband, hey, guess what? Surprise, we're going to go out to dinner with the Mitchells. This is going to be great. And the 5's like, you don't understand. That would take 30% or 15% or 10%. I only have 5. Like, I can't do that. And that can feel like they don't want to be with people, but it's not that. It's that they feel like they don't have enough energy reserves inside. So that's where people can understand this core weakness for 5s. Now, what they long to know is that their needs are not a problem. And isn't that beautiful that we know that Christ fulfills all of our needs, and it's not a problem. In fact, he came without us even asking because he knew he could fulfill all of our really deep needs. And so what a 5 will do when they're coming into a situation is they're focusing on how can they detach and just observe and keep their boundaries up to protect that energy reserve. And so when they're resting in Christ, they can realize Christ will fill me up. He will give me more energy and reserves when I need it, and he will portion it out correctly. Any questions on that one?
I am curious, are there I know extrovert introvert isn't quite Enneagram language, but are there extroverted 5s?
Yeah, there are. I mean, they're still going to have this kind of inner core of depletion, but there are 5s that, they really kind of get maybe a little bit more energy by being with people, but they still need to. So here's how 5s get recharged: by going into their mind and processing their thoughts and feelings alone. And usually 5s like to do this in a private space if they can. So maybe at home they'll have a very private space that it's no one else's. If they can't go there, but they really need something, they can read a book or go internal into their mind and kind of rest. And I even had a 5 once say, I can actually focus on, let's say, my work and my hobbies that maybe I feel depleted in. I'm not thinking about those. And so those are actually kind of recharging on the side while I'm doing something completely different. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. But so for them, they just have to know where they can recharge and how. So for some 5s, the recharging might be being with people, but it's not going to look like, a type 7 who's extrovert or one of the other types. And so, yes, there is that, but fundamentally for the 5, it's this catastrophic depletion that really is a source of weakness for them, of the fear. That makes sense?
Yeah. Listen, sometimes with all my little children that I have, I feel like a 5.
I'm sure, yes. Most of us moms, right? It's like, oh my goodness, please give me some space.
Yes.
Yeah. Moms will even try to go into the restroom just to have a reprieve, and the kids are still...
Exactly. There's still little fingers underneath the door.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Did we do the focus of attention for a 5?
Yeah, so the detaching and trying to observe their boundaries.
Yeah.
So, and that can be hard for people because they're like, why are you so detached, emotionally? Well, because that the emotions or the blending with people can really just deplete them. So they really feel when the depletion is lower, it's like if you were a 5 and I just grabbed the phone out of your hand and you had 5% left, and I'm like, hey, let's stream some live video. I mean, you would be like, no, you don't understand. You can't do that. I need to save this for the rest of the day. And so there would be a little bit more insistence about the boundaries, versus maybe another type, like a 9 would be like, oh, sure, kind of like accommodate wherever they can. And so when the 5 gets to that depletion stage, the boundaries are going to be a little bit more rigid and noticeable than, like I said, some of the other types. And privacy is a huge importance to a 5 as well. That's another focus of attention. The type 6 is our loyal guardians, and they fear itself, like having fear, being afraid to have fear. But they also fear not having support, guidance, and security. And they fear that they're going to be blamed, targeted, physically abandoned, and just alone. Now, what they really are desiring is security, guidance, and support. Now, the core weakness of the 6 helps us to really understand them better, which is its anxiety. And for the 6s, they have a constant thought pattern of worst case scenarios. So they're always scanning the horizon to plan and predict and think through what could happen. And it's not to be pessimistic. It's actually to prevent those things from happening. So they're always thinking of, okay, well, this could happen, but that could happen, but this, but that. So what happens in their mind, they have an inner committee that is always chiming in. Well, don't forget about this. And then another inner committee is saying, but don't forget about that. And there's all of these voices from different angles, which can cause confusion for the 6 of, well, which one should I listen to? And so 6s tend to ask for people's opinions and advice, or read up on things to get more information to make a final decision. That doesn't mean they're going to follow any one particular advice, but it helps them to bounce off what these inner committees are saying, so that they feel like they can make the best accurate decision. But what we want them to do is to listen to their own inner true self, that the Holy Spirit will speak to their true self with peace and assurance. But because this anxiety pops up so much, it scatters them with the inner committee, and it can feel like a lot of self-doubt. Now, their focus of attention is walking into a room or situation and anticipating potential problems or worst case scenarios. So they just naturally go to that way of thinking, so that hopefully they can prevent it from happening. And what they long to hear is, you are safe. And what more of a beautiful way than the gospel, right? I mean, right. Christ literally has taken care of everything, every worst case scenario for, as in the heavenly realms, right? He has taken care of through his death and resurrection, conquering death. And, like the song we sang at this weekend, him being a cleft, our safety, our rock. And that's what God is. He's the all-powerful, the all-knowing. I mean, the waves and the wind will stop at his voice. We are safe in him. And so, though obviously we live on this side of heaven and the real things do happen, we ultimately know we're safe in his care. So that's a real help for the type 6s. Okay, so then the type 7s are the entertaining optimists. Now, they fear being trapped in emotional pain, deprived or limited, and they definitely fear being bored and missing out on something fun or exciting. Now, what they hope to have is happiness and complete satisfaction and contentment. And so they're really striving and longing for those things, which leads them to their core weakness, which is gluttony. And this is the insatiable desire to fill themselves up with either exciting stimulation or experiences. And what they're trying to do is eliminate any emotional pain possible, which can include anything from as simple as boredom to grief and other things that are super hard. So they're just really focusing on filling themselves up with positive, stimulating ideas and activities. And the hard thing, with that is it's almost like they have this, let's pretend like an empty bucket inside, and there's holes in it. And so they're trying to fill it with water, but it just keeps seeping out. And that's what it feels like on this side of heaven, is like, oh, well, if I can just have one more experience or one more fun, maybe I'll feel happy and fulfilled. but it just never lasts. So we want them to experience gratitude and seeing and being in the moment and savoring the moment so that they feel the blessings instead of it just being this, thing that kind of runs through the bucket and is gone. And so their focus of attention is best case thinking. So they're always going into a room thinking, how can I see this in a positive light? Not a negative or emotionally sorrowful light. How can I spin it into a positive light? How can I make this great? How can I make this fun? How can I make it wonderful? And so they're constantly in that place and then that mindset. Now, what they long to hear is you will be taken care of. And some sevens are like, well, I don't really understand that. Well, even if they had wonderful parents, the seven's desires are endless. It's that bucket.
Yeah.
It's as if they have hunger pains that are so, like they're ravenous, right? And their parents are like, here's a nice healthy meal. And they put it in their stomach and it's like, that only filled like maybe a quarter. Like, you don't understand, I'm starving. And so they ask for more and more. So like, let's say the parents took them out to Chuck E. Cheese and like, okay, well, what can we do next? And the parents are exhausted. Like, what do you need? Like, are you not satisfied? And so the message that the seven can hear is, like, no. And like, well, is anyone going to take care of this hunger that I have? Mm-hmm. And they, on one side, can see that it's being taken care of, but yet it feels like it's not, right? So will I be taken care of? And yes, Christ takes care of all of those deeper longings and needs. And it may not look the way that they think it should look, but he is the spring of living water that never runs dry. And so we can come to him and get replenished.
Do sevens tend to feel like they're too much?
They might. People might say, boy, you have a lot of energy, or, because they usually have lots of energy, lots of excitement. Their mind is bristling with new thoughts and ideas and stuff like that. But usually they're going to spin it outwardly, at least positively. Like, okay. But whereas the 4, a lot of types can feel too much, whereas the 4 is going to feel too much and it's going to bring them emotional, more of a melancholy or depths.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the type 8 is the protective challenger, and they fear being weak, powerless, harmed, controlled, manipulated in any kind of way, shape, or form. And definitely they fear being at the mercy of injustice. Now, they desire to protect themselves and those that are innocent and at the mercy of injustice. And so they always are kind of feeling like someone is going to blindside them or betray them in some way. And they kind of are just kind of at this ready stance. Now, they're not always looking this big, tough part, but if something comes up, they will instinctively and viscerally protect and react. And so it can be a very fast movement to protection. So their core weakness is lust or excess. So this is a lust to want constant intensity, control, power, to exert themselves and push themselves in any way, shape, or form. Like if they have a task at hand, they're just going to push forward really strongly. And so it can feel very overwhelming to others. They have this really big energy. And so that people can feel as if they're plowing over them. And I call them snow plows. And here's the reason why. A snow plow, especially growing up in the Midwest, is so needed. These big, powerful trucks. Mm-hmm. And we need them, not just little shovels and stuff. We need these big, powerful trucks to take on opposition and plow paths to the hospitals and et cetera. But if that plow is misused and nicks the cars on the road or simply plows over things, that's not very helpful. And so some people, because of their big energy and their directness and boldness and bluntness, can feel plowed over. But a lot of times the heart of an 8 is, I'm trying to plow a path for others. I'm trying to help. Why do people feel they're intimidated by me, or I'm too big? And that can be a real source of pain, because some people are not seeing the real heart of an 8. They're seeing the outward manifestations of bigness, boldness, bluntness. And so 8s have a really tender heart, and they fear so much of being harmed and betrayed that they put this shield up over it. So like, think about if you had a really big burn wound, you would do everything to cover it and to protect it. Mm-hmm. So they protect their heart from being betrayed and blindsided. And so what they really long, or let's see, the the focus of attention, we'll go there first, is taking control and to protect themselves and others. So when they walk into a room, how do I need to protect myself? And this isn't just a physical protection. It could be, is there a weak leader? Are they not leading well? Do I need to be the one to take charge? Do I need to be the one to take over? Because if they're not going to do it, someone needs to, and no one else will, so I must. So that's a form of protection that they might have. So what they want to know is that they won't be betrayed, but that's where Christ comes in. Here, he was the one that was the most betrayed, with not just Judas, but all of his disciples. And then even while he was on the cross, because all the disciples left him or, abandoned him. But then on the cross, God, while he had the sins on him, had to turn away. So he knows what it feels like to go through that pain and suffering. So he is the best representation to say, I will never leave nor forsake you. And that's where the aides can know he is my power and my protection.
Yeah. I am married to an 8. So I a lot of what you're saying feels very true.
Yeah. And they're very tender, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes. And I think I was just thinking, I know we're not going to get a chance to talk about the wings, but I feel like the wings that the 7 or the 9 that surround them probably plays into that a lot. It's like there's a lot of sweetness and goodness and generosity behind the snow plowness.
Yes. Yeah. And they feel very misunderstood. And they can't see the strength that they have. They don't understand how that's coming across to others. And so often they're misunderstood. And what happens is people get frustrated and irritated with them and angry back at them. But that only brings up more of what they believed is going to be true. See, someone's harming me. See, I need to protect, Whereas if people can go, you know what, I don't know if I'm really seeing the heart of this 8 in the way that I need to. I need to ask better questions or not react to their bigness or anger or boldness the way I used to. I need to get to know their heart. And once you see the beautiful part of an 8 heart, your life will change forever. And you will see the strength and the beauty of Christ in a way that you just never fathomed. And so that's my hope for people. And I'm a type 9, which is the next one. And if I can say that, because as a 9, I almost couldn't even read about type 8s when I was much more unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's like just so afraid of conflict. And 8s are like, no, confrontational intimacy is great, But because I have had so many sweet 8s in my life to reveal their real heart and what's going on, it's just made me fall in love with how God has created the 8s. And so I hope that people will take the opportunities to see the beauty of a healthy 8. Now, obviously, all of us, when we're unhealthy, is not great. I don't care what number you are. But all the numbers, when they're doing really well, they manifest and reflect the glory of God. And so I want others to also have that opportunity with type 8s.
Yeah, and I feel like something that we've been married we just celebrated our 12th wedding anniversary, so it's been a journey of figuring this out. But what I feel like is arguing, he's like, no, we're just talking. I'm like, no, you're arguing with me. He's like, no, we're just having a discussion. So that has taken a long time to be like, for me to recognize I need to say, hey, when you say it like this, it makes me feel like this. And so that has helped tremendously. And because I am one with definitely a lot of 9 in me. So the confrontation is very scary. So it's been helpful. So, all right, type 9, let's hear it.
Yep, type 9, last but not least, my type, the peaceful mediator. So we fear being in pretty much any kind of conflict or tension. Especially conflict directed at us. Like if someone is upset at us or angry, that's just the worst. But we also fear being loveless or separated or disconnected from relationships, being shut out, any discordant or inharmonious relationship. But we also really fear being overlooked. And that kind of goes into the message our heart longs to hear, which I'll get to in a little bit. But being overlooked is so painful because we already overlook ourselves based on how we think of ourselves. But then when someone else overlooks us, it's just like, that's so painful. Now, the core desire for the 9 is they really just want inner stability and peace of mind. So think of them having like a lake inside, and they just want this calm, smooth waters on a sunset night with beautiful scenery. That's like a heaven space for a 9. But then people will come in with either big boulders or rocks or the wind or tornadoes or whatever, and they're creating all this disruption inside. And so the waves are too much and too big, and it's too overwhelming for the 9. Like, they just want to shut it down and like make everyone stop and let's have peace again. Let's get the waters calm. That's kind of what the 9 is hoping for. But what happens is the core weakness of the 9 is sloth. And sloth is the desire to be unaffected by life. So they do this by not knowing themselves, by not being awake to their passions, desires, and wants. And the reason is, if I tell you what I want and you don't want that, that's conflict. So it's much easier for me just to go along to get along and ignore myself.
Yeah, interesting.
To have this quote unquote peace and harmony than risk having any kind of conflict or tension by saying what I want and need. And so they've learned how to minimize themselves. And so I talked to 9s about it being like a fog. If you were to ask a 9, so what do you want to do today? Or what's your life's ambitions? Or what are your hobbies? What do you love? It's like all of a sudden we're deer in headlights. Like, I don't know. Like, don't ask me these tough questions. And whereas everyone else is like, how is this a tough question? It's like, you don't understand. I don't know.
It's because you feel like you can't occupy that space. You feel like you can't answer it.
Well, there's part of it that I feel like if I know, well, what if I say and you don't like it? Like,
yeah.
But a lot of times we just don't know. We're in a fog. And because we focus on everyone else, so we have a hard time focusing in on ourselves. And so sometimes, yes, we know what we want, and it's hard to say, and sometimes we don't. So we have to kind of know that it could be both for the 9s. But either space is sad, right? I mean, they have so many gifts and desires, and they bring such beauty in the world when they show up. And they are themselves, and they bring peace and oneness and wholeness and harmony with strength. But because we're so afraid to show up in that way, a lot of times we hide. And that's just not going to be helpful for others, communities, etc. So what happens when the 9 enters a room or a relationship, their focus of attention is other people's agendas to keep the peace. So when I walk into a room, I have this just innate ability to feel a room. Is there tension? Is everyone okay? Is something off? So it's kind of like a 2, but it's more this overall like gut reaction. This something's off over here. I don't know what it is, but something is off. Now, the 9s will even try to pretend to ignore the gut, but it can get pretty loud, and they can't necessarily decipher it. They just feel uncomfortable, and they just want to get away from that uncomfortable space. And so the 9s want to just learn what's going to make everyone happy. Let me just tell me what you want. We'll just make you happy. I can adapt. I can go along. And they think that's going to bring peace. But what they really desire is the message that their heart longs to hear is your presence matters. Your voice matters. You are enough just as you are. And that's exactly what God says. It's, I see you for who you are in all your depravity and glory, your likes and desires, your confusion, your fogginess, all of it. You matter. And what you can bring to the world is so important. We need you to show up. And so God came to rescue us so that we could live in our fullness of who we are, the radiance that he puts in us, that we have giftedness and skills that are different from others, and to not hide or withdraw. And so that's where the 9 needs to just really step in, like I said earlier, into that black space of the Truman Show door of, I think I have something off in the world. I don't feel like it sometimes because my internal record player says otherwise, but God says I matter. God says my voice matters. God says my skills matter. So I'm going to just trust and step out into this and see what happens. And then God blesses that because he's going to bless others and glorify himself. So there you have it. All 9 types.
Yeah, I feel like I need to give you a round of applause because that's a lot. Yes, that's so much. I love hearing about it. And the funny thing is, I feel like I can see parts of myself in all of them, which I think is what you said. Like every single one of the 9 types reflects certain parts of God. And so almost all the types are in us, but there's going to be one that's pretty primary.
Yes, right. And that's what's so cool. So Marilyn Van Zyl, she has a book called Self-Delude, Self-Defined. And it's a great biblical view on the Enneagram. And she talks about how each type reflects God. And there's like 2 specific words that she uses. And it's beautiful because a lot of people with the Enneagram, like I said earlier, kind of see it and they focus in on the negativity and, oh, I'm so terrible. It's like, no, yes, please see it, apologize, ask for forgiveness, but move on to what you know God created you to be. He wants to reflect himself through you, and he's designed you in a very beautiful way. So when we think of the 9 types and all of these different colors, we want to see that we are his body. Therefore, there's diversity, but in that diversity, there's unity. And that unity is to bring glory back to Christ and to bless us and all of our relationships. And so we need all of us together. I mean, if we all had, let's say, if everyone was a 2, we'd all be chasing each other with gifts and advice, but we would all be avoiding everyone else. I mean, so we love our 2s, but we can't have everyone be 2s, and we can't have everyone being 9s or 3s. So we need this diversity. So we need to see the beauty that, yes, people see the world differently, and it can be absolutely frustrating at times, but it's also really good. And we need to learn to have compassion, understanding, asking clarifying questions, not assumiciding, all of these things to bring about real peace and harmony through the lens of our type and our strengths. So that is the beauty of the Enneagram, and it's super wonderful and super hard all at the same time.
Yeah, like so many good things in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I know we are running out of time. I have a few questions I ask every guest, but I want to fit one more question in, Beth, if you don't mind. I know that Enneagram often doesn't like to type children, like under, I don't even know, 16 or something like that. Can you just tell me briefly why that is and how we can still use the Enneagram as a tool to understand our kids better?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, my own story is a great example of that. I started really focusing in on the Enneagram when my kids were 3 and 5.
Okay.
And, of course, like every parent, I want another type. But what I learned over the years is a good rule of thumb is to hold a couple numbers loosely, because we can't really know why they're doing what they're doing. That's their heart motive. Only they can reveal that. And so, like I said, there's so many layers to the Enneagram. You can mistype by just looking at their outward behaviors. Just because a kid keeps their room tidy doesn't mean they're always a 1. Some 6s would do that. Some 3s would do that. Some 9s would do it because they're trying to please their parents. I could go through all the numbers why they would do that. And so we have to be very careful on just watching the outward behaviors. But you can kind of more easily eliminate some numbers. Like with my son, I was like, okay, I know he's not an 8. I know he's not a 7 or a 5 or a 4 or a 3 or 9. So all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm landing on 1, 2, and 6. And for a long time I was on those 3 numbers. And I would even ask him questions like, okay, Nate, did you do that because of this or this? And he'd be like, yeah. You're like, you're not helping me. Yeah. And so I just had to trust the Lord. Like, okay, I'll do the best I can with the numbers that I feel like he's put in my heart that might be him. But even that, I need to hold it very loosely. And so long story short, around 14 or 15, we found out he was a 6 because he named it for himself. But then my daughter, I thought, was a 9 or 2. And I thought she was probably more 9 because she looked a lot like me because I'm a 9 with an 8 wing. And so she had a little bit of sass and, intrigue to also being very peaceable or easygoing as a little girl and wanting everyone to feel included and loved. Well, but, I was like, well, it could be 2 as well. But I didn't really think so because we looked so similar. Well, then when she took the test around 14, I just did the test just to see where their scores landed, just to have conversation. Not that the test would tell me that that's their type, because tests only give you a guidance, not enough affirmation of your type. But so type 2 came up and she read about the 2 and she's like, oh my gosh, this is so me. And I'm like, really? And lo and behold, year after year since then, that 2-ness pops up more and more and more. And it's just so amazing. Like, oh, we are so different, Libby. This is so funny. Where we'll see what happens is she was taking on so much of me when she was a little girl and reflecting my 9-ness to please and to love. And that's all she knew. But of course, when kids get into those teenage years, like most parents know, it's like, wait, who's this new kid? Like, where did they come from? Well, it's their personality coming into their fullness in the sense of, it's kind of where kids are struggling, right? I mean, those middle school years and those high school years are hard. So that personality defenses really start to glare. And it confuses the parents because, wait, that's not how you were when you were younger.
Right.
Well, actually, it was probably already there. It just wasn't manifesting.
Mm.
So that's why I always encourage parents just to hold a couple numbers very loosely, be very mindful, like Mary, study your child. Mary studied Jesus. So study your child and do the best you can, but always resting on the sovereignty of God. He loves your child more than you do. And so by being open and receptive to him and his guidance, and to have a non-anxious presence as a parent, you will do much more blessings for your child than trying to figure this all out and it be a very specific way.
Yeah. And you can affirm your child sort of in a way that would appeal to all 9 types, and it's still very positive and very helpful and very, what's the word I'm looking for? Just like reinforces your relationship. So you can affirm, what a 9 would be. You matter to me. You can affirm, you have a lot of uniqueness, but like a 4 would want to hear. Like you can affirm them in many different ways, even if it's not their specific need, but surely every kid wants to hear all 9 of those inner questions. Yeah.
Exactly. And how can we point them to God and how God answers all 9 of these, right? So then we know at least they're hearing all 9, and one might in their heart go, oh, that's so great. And they may or may not show it to you. But if we cover them with how Scripture answers any of these, it really, really blesses them. And then once they are able to tell you their type, and to really it's solid, it's firm, and you're recognizing, oh yeah, I'm seeing the correlation here. Then as a parent, we can really start parenting them with a lot of love and grace on the weaknesses that overcome them, with the grace and the power of Christ, with Scripture, with the gospel, because it's not about us making our kids into a certain way or making our kids into the best version of themselves, because on earth, we're all going to struggle. It's about showing them the grace and the forgiveness and the love of Christ.
Yeah.
And that's the power of growth and transformation. Not that they measure up or they become what you think they should become. It's by releasing them from your grips and allowing God to take over.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to parent all the sin out of somebody. Like that's impossible, but you can surely just help them, like give them everything they need to find strength in their weaknesses.
Right. To guide them, back to that. So
good.
Yeah. So good questions. Thank you.
So good, Beth. Thank you so much. Well, I know we are running out of time, but there are 2 questions I ask every guest who comes on. The first one is, as you are walking out the story that God has written for you, what's a heart lesson he's been reminding you of lately?
Yeah, the message that he's been reminding me lately is that I can boldly step out, and this obviously goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is why I was saying it, boldly step out into how he created me, knowing that he will use it for his good purposes, but also my joy and other people's blessings. But so often I am ensnared by the other message, like, no, don't do that. Just retreat, don't show up. But I'm learning that his embrace of me and his power propel me forward, that I don't have to manufacture it myself.
Yeah.
And so, like we said earlier, resting in that when it's not always restful, as in it's action oriented, but it's from a place of surrender and dependence on what's true. And that's what he's been really focusing my heart on.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you have built such a beautiful ministry and business that it just shows that you really are operating from a place of 9, resting in who God created them to be. Because, like you said, a Core's 9 sin, deadly sin. I forget the word that you use, but it's like sloth, and like maybe you would otherwise just kind of hang around because you weren't sure how you're supposed to use your gifts. But then here you are, and you are blessing all of us, and I think that's incredible testimony of what God has done in your heart.
Well, thank you. It's always, as you know, a work in progress, but I'm very thankful for him doing so far the work that he is doing. And I love just feeling that peace and oneness with him. So yeah, but of course you asked me like 5 minutes ago or 2 minutes or 10 minutes from now. And but that's the beauty of the Enneagram is it helps you to know, am I on my best path, trusting the Lord, or am I veering off course and relying on myself? But even if I am, we're still okay in him. Yeah. And so I can go and not pick up myself up by my bootstraps, but, okay, God, kind of, sorry, I veered off course. Will you once again lift me up and put me back into the direction that you would have me. And that's why I love the Enneagram, because it's there to help you to navigate your internal world. But the gospel is the transformational tool.
Yes, so good. All right, Beth, last question. What is something you're looking forward to?
Oh, goodness. Well, you know what? I'm looking forward to, we're writing a book, my husband
fun.
and I. We're in the middle of the book, so I can't say I'm looking forward to being in the middle of the process.
Looking forward to the end.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being at the end and just people, having a deeper understanding of how to use the Enneagram in marriage from a gospel perspective. I think that God has, in our 23 years and in 15 years of using the Enneagram in our marriage, it is such a dynamic, resourceful help, because we can communicate in ways that we never could have before, but we also know how to point each other back to Christ.
Yeah.
And so I'm really looking forward to that coming out. Now, when that is going to be, we don't know, but it's work. It's in progress. Lord knows when that is going to be, but I am really looking forward to that.
Oh, well, that's so good. Well, Beth, where can we find you on the internet so you can learn more about you and what you offer, the services you offer, and then just more about the Enneagram and how we can use it to point ourselves to the gospel?
Oh, great. Yeah. So where most people follow me is Instagram, and the handle is Your Enneagram Coach. So very blessed by all the followers we have there. And that's just a great daily reminder for one type at a time on a subject. And it's just kind of fun to learn about all the types, but then to learn about yourself. And it's a really sweet community too. But then my website, yourenneagramcoach.com, in the upper right-hand corner is a yellow button that says take a free assessment. And in that I have 3 steps, because assessments, no matter which one you take, are only as good as we know ourselves. And so we don't want to just rely on the assessment. We just want it to be kind of give us a heads up or guidance on how we answer the questions. But I have 3 steps in there. So the first one is that. The second one is a free PDF download of pretty much kind of what I went over today. What are the core fears, desires, and weaknesses of each type, so that you can see it more fully to really validate or confirm your type. And then also have a lot of fun with other people, which one's yours? And then you guys can look at it together. So that's free. Then the third step is my Discovering You course. And this is, like I said, the Cliff Notes version. So it's a 2-hour course, and it has a free or a workbook that comes with it. And I walk you through the Enneagram in an easy to understand way. What is it? How do I use it? And then an overview of all 9 types. Great place to start. It's probably better than starting in any of those big complex books. And that's going to help people to find their type, but also to understand the foundational elements of the Enneagram. But then my next course is called Exploring You. And this takes you into 5 pre-recorded coaching videos of how I coach my private clients, but at a much less expensive route. And so I'm taking you through 5 guide sheets that break your personality down into 5 lessons. So, or I guess bite-sized lessons, which 5 sessions. And this is so you can learn, stretch, and grow without becoming overwhelmed. And it's all through a biblical perspective. So we want you to watch one of the courses and kind of go through the guide sheet with me and digest it, use it in, for the next couple of days, and then do the next session and do that 5 times. And all of a sudden you're going to have a much deeper and richer understanding of yourself. So that's Exploring You. And then of course, for those that want to become a Enneagram coach, I have a course for them as well. So that's what we've got going on.
That's awesome. I'm so excited to be able to point people your direction. And I think I started learning more about the Instagram, the Enneagram last summer. And it's just been really helpful. And I just really like it. And I just love the same thing that you said. Just love that it points you to the gospel and how the Lord can bring strength to your weakness. So
absolutely.
Thank you for everything that you've given us today. And my prayer is just that everyone who listens can just use it to understand themselves better and those around them better, and just ultimately to just give everyone much more grace, the same grace that we receive from our Father. So thank you so much, Beth.
Yeah, thank you.
Beth, thank you so much. Another round of applause for you. I just think it's amazing that you know all of those details about all the personality types, and you're just so good at sharing them and really articulating them well to us. So thank you for that. I hope you were able to listen and kind of identify with one of the types and maybe just understand a little bit better how the Lord wired you and how you should move towards health and how the gospel can redeem even the hard parts of your personality. It's super fun. And just thinking about how each personality type sees the world so differently, I really do think it helps us move towards empathy and understanding and compassion with one another. If you are interested in finding out more about what Beth does with the Enneagram, you can visit her at yourenneagramcoach.com, and I'll spell Enneagram for you. Enneagram, Enneagram. So you can connect with Beth there, find links to all of her social media, and her Instagram is actually really fun to follow. As she said, she goes through series every couple of weeks, different ways that the Enneagram applies to different aspects of personality, how you can move toward health, how you can pursue growth, how you relate to other types. It's really, really fun to follow along. You can also find links to everything Beth and I talked about, everything that we mentioned in the show notes at sarahrieke.com/podcast. And you'll be able to find everything we mentioned there, links so you can click right to whatever you are interested in finding out more about. Additionally, in the show notes, you'll be able to find the takeaway truths. As I listen back through each episode, I just jot down some really great nuggets of truth that the guest shared. And so I try to put those there for you to find easily as well. Speaking of show notes, I just wanted to say that there was a very wonderful listener who left a very kind review on iTunes. Thank you so much for that review. And in the review, she asked me a question, and I felt so bad because there's actually no way that I can reply to those comments. And so I was like, oh my goodness, how on earth am I going to answer that question? So I just wanted to address it right here and hope that she listens and is able to find her answer. So let me just say, if there is something that you hear on an episode and you're wondering about it, wondering more details, wondering how you can find out about it or what maybe we actually said, the first thing to do probably is check the show notes, see if you find what you need there. If not, definitely email me or find me on Instagram or Facebook and ask the question there. And those are definitely places that I'll be able to respond. But like I said, I can't respond to those comments in the reviews, even though they're so nice. And I wish I could give each one 5 hearts and say thank you. But I'm not able to do that. But for that very kind listener, I wanted to go ahead and just answer your question right here. And so the question that she asked was about a podcast that I mentioned in the intentionality series, the first part 1 of the intentionality series. And I mentioned a podcast that my husband likes to listen to from a former Navy SEAL, and it is called the Jocko podcast. That's JOCKO podcast. And as I said, he is a former Navy SEAL turned business management consultant. He has a podcast that is centered on just living with solid character and discipline, and it is a really great podcast. He has some really incredible wisdom to share. He invites wonderful guests onto his show. So it is a really wonderful resource. It is not faith-based as far as I can tell, but it is filled with so much wisdom and definitely worth looking into. So again, that's Jocko podcast, JOCKO. I hope that answers your question. I hope you're able to find it. Well, while we're on the topic of reviews, thank you so much for those of you who have left ratings and reviews. It is so helpful for the show. I appreciate it so very much. So thankful that you stick around every week, and it is a joy and a privilege to be able to reach all of you in this way. Next week, my guest will be Lindsay Goff-Vidicic, daughter of Bob Goff, and she is going to talk with us about her upcoming release that she co-wrote with her father, Love Does for Kids. So I'm really excited to share Lindsay's perspective with you on how we can teach our kids to love those around them well. All right, friends, well, follow me on Instagram so we can continue to explore this idea of what it means to live with and to love others well. And that is all from me for today. As always, I hope you are inspired and encouraged to walk well in the story that God has written, especially for you. Bye, guys.